after studying and practicing and teaching several methods and modalities of healing and spiritual teachings, I came across the realization process, and it completely shifted everything for me. Hi, I'm Roberta Tachi, and today I have here with me Judith Blackstone, the founder of Realization Process. So Judith Blackstone is an innovative and experienced teacher in the contemporary fields of non-dual realization and spiritual, relational, and somatic psychotherapy. She developed the realization process, a direct path to realization of fundamental consciousness, as well as the application of non-dual realization for psychological, relational, and physical healing. She currently has 6 books in publication and has been teaching the realization process for 35 years in the United States and Europe. Her most recent book is Trauma and the Unbound Body, The Healing Power of Fundamental Consciousness. So welcome, Judith. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. And I want to mention right off the bat that I always remember when I was reading this introduction to the belonging here, because it made me cry. It really made me cry, because I'm reading and crying and thinking, oh, she's writing about me. She's writing about me, you know, spiritual, sensitive people. So I feel very fortunate that I have met you and I have met the realization process, and it's an honor to be able to become a teacher and also introduce this to other parts of the world, as I have been doing in other languages, because I want more people to know about this system, your method, which is really beautiful, this process of to reach non-dual realization. So I'm going to introduce this year the spiritual, psychological aspect of realization process to Brazil this year. So I have 2 big questions. One is, what is realization process? Because I think it's important for people to know. And also how the realization process contributes to the psychological healing.
Okay.
Can you speak to that?
Those are two big questions.
Well, we have time to cover one and then cover another one.
Okay, good. So the realization process is basically a series of attunement practices for inward attunement into one's own being, one's own body, for the purpose of uncovering a very subtle consciousness that we actually can experience, pervading our whole body and pervading our whole environment. And in this work, I call this consciousness fundamental consciousness, because it feels like the basic ground of our being, like we've really touched into who we really are when we uncover it. And it's also mentioned in the Hindu system, in the Buddhist system, and parts of it. So it's an aspect of our being, although very subtle, that has been known about since people first sat down and began to do spiritual practice. It's something that you get to as you attune deeply and subtly inward to yourself. So fundamental consciousness, all of the practices really are about uncovering that ground of our being. Now, when we uncover it pervading our body, it's undivided, right? It's more subtle than any of the content of our experience. So it's not our emotions, it's not our thoughts, not our physical sensations or our perceptions of the world around us, but it's more subtle than all of those aspects of our experience, and it's undivided. So it pervades all of the content of our experience without being fragmented itself, without being even, we can say, affected itself. So when we uncover it pervading our whole body, it feels like the basic ground of our individual being. And we actually feels like who we are. It has a kind of an impact of authenticity. It feels real. It feels like, oh, finally, you know, I've taken off all these masks, all these persona, and I feel real. I feel
finally I am in me.
Yes, finally I'm me, and that's the feeling of fundamental consciousness. So not an impersonal feeling at all, but a deeply, deeply personal feeling. And because it pervades our whole body, it gives us a sense of wholeness, of being able to function as a whole, which means we can think and feel at the same time, which is very helpful, of course, in making decisions or really any of our life choices or interacting with people or expressing ourselves. That it comes not just from our head, not just from our heart, but from our whole being.
It's this pervading our whole body. It means that we have to be present in our body. And I think a lot of people do not even know they are not present. And I always remember when I told my husband, I'm going to teach you how to be in your body. And he looked at me and like, what am I now then? I said, I don't know, but you're not in your body.
Yes, it's really true. Most people don't live in their body. It's something we need to learn, to recover in ourselves. Most of us, in fact, live in front of ourselves because we're so used to coming out of ourselves to meet the world, right? Or we live above ourselves, right? Trying to rise above any sort of human difficulties that we may have. So we start in the realization process with a practice of inhabiting the body. And it's very different than being aware of the body. It's quite a switch, right? So
I like if you can talk a little bit about this, because a lot of people go and think, oh, it's like scanning the body. And I say, no, it's not scanning the body, because if you're scanning the body, you're also objectifying your body as the object of observation. So being present is a non-dual system, which brings the subject and object to be one. So it's for me, what I say sometimes, like your mind is in your feet, so that it's not your mind here observing the feet over there. But they don't understand until they have experience, and that's what I feel. But it's okay, because the experience speaks, I think, louder than the words. But can you talk a little bit about this, being aware and being present?
Yeah. I mean, just to give you a quick taste of it, just listening to me now, if you want to take a moment to be aware of your hands,
Mm-hmm.
and in being aware of your hands, which of course is, if you're not at all aware of your body, it's a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You may notice how tense or relaxed they are, or how warm or how cold they are. And that's being aware of your hands. And you may also notice that it's a top-down kind of function, right? From our mind up here, we're observing our hands down there. And now enter into your hands. See if you can feel that you are the internal space of your hands, that you're present there, that you're living within your hands.
Yeah. And this, in fact, doing this immediately makes me feel like it brings more presence everywhere. And of course, I have been practicing this for a while, but even I have had people doing this practice and just shift everything, because they realize there's something they have never felt before, which is even the simple practice of being present in the hands. Yeah.
Many people describe it as coming home, as a sense of coming home finally, that they belong somewhere, that they belong in their body.
They belong in. And talking about belonging, it reminds of the presence, feeling that you have the right to be here, to take space, that the space in your body is yours, is no one else's. Yeah.
It's a wonderful feeling to actually feel the sense of your own existence within your body. And we get to feel that when we live in the body, we get to actually feel, oh, I really do exist. And for a sensitive person who has often felt overwhelmed by other people, that's wonderful to feel like, oh, I'm just as much alive as anyone else here, because I can feel that. So yes, and it gives us a sense of taking up space, of internal volume. Also, we uncover qualities of our being that seem to be innate, that we don't create, that simply emerge as we inhabit the body. And those are qualities like power, which is wonderful to feel, especially if we've been overpowered in some way, as most of us have growing up in one way or another.
Yes.
To actually feel that quality of power, which we usually feel like in the midsection, like between our ribs and our pelvis. We can attune to that quality, and it makes us actually more powerful in the world, more effective in everything.
And I feel the quality of power is especially strong, especially important for people who have had trauma, because, you know, in the childhood, especially during the childhood, if they have parents who, you know, have violence in the house, or in Brazil, it used to be very common to have, you know, beat the kids and stuff like that. And also sexual abuse. You lose the sense of having any power over your own body and yourself. And I think this realization process, brings back this sense of empowerment. I have, in fact, a student who mentioned, I felt a sense of empowerment I never felt before. The self-knowledge, the knowing myself and having power within myself. And I think this is tremendous, important for our shift in who we are.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, part of power is what we call agency, the ability to really know what we want and to go after it, to know that we deserve what we want, and we have the means, we have the power to go towards what we want. And that's something that often gets squelched, that often gets flattened when we are traumatized, that sense of our own agency, right? Because we have been overpowered, because we've lost that agency during the trauma. We really need to attune to it, get it back again. And that's one of the things that happen as we inhabit the body.
Yeah, in fact, talking about the power, I had 2 clients recently who decided to quit their job. And I'm like, I hope they're okay. And they are like, after 5 years, they wanted to quit the job, and they started to work with the realization process, and they realized that they could quit their job. And then they did. And it was not like an impulsive decision. It was now like a really knowing for sure that they could, because they were like overstepped in positions that they didn't want to be. And I thought, oh, this is so powerful that now they could do something that they have been for 5 years, you know, afraid of doing because of all the other aspects that were not there, especially, I think, the power in their own presence. And it was very transformational for them. And they said, I feel really good. I know I did the right thing. And I think it comes from that as well. Yeah.
Yes, that contact that we get when we inhabit the body is really contact with knowing what we want, what our true responses are, whether a relationship is really working for us, whether we're getting what we need, what our needs are in a relationship or in any situation. So yes, inhabiting the body is the first step in the realization process. So when we uncover this consciousness that pervades our whole body, which is our deepest contact with ourselves, at the same time, this is a very interesting thing, we experience it pervading everything outside of us as well. So we not only have a sense of being separate and whole within ourselves, but at the same time, in the same way, we have a sense of being deeply connected with the world around us, right? Without losing inward contact with ourselves. So this is the uncovering of our true boundaries, that we don't need to keep people out, or we don't need to just let them override us. We can be in contact with ourselves as fundamental consciousness, and at the same time, deeply in contact with other people, nature, with everything around us. So we become both whole and one at the same time.
I even wrote here a few topics that I wanted to talk and ask about. And one of them was exactly this, the boundaries and relationship. And I always remember when I first inhabit my phase that I really felt that I was not here, but I was really deep here. And I really had a felt sense of being in peace with myself and feeling so safe. I said, I did not know. This is so safe. It's safe to be here, safe to be in my face. It was such a a new thing. It's when we talk, it feels like, is she crazy? No, but it's very tangible. I think people think that is something like woo-woo, but I think it's very tangible, and it's a real experience of not just an idea. It's a real organic experience in yourself to feel safe within, to be really safe, and know that nothing outside will hurt you because it's safe within. It's I think for me it was a really new discovery. It was like, wow, this is really powerful.
Yes.
Yeah, this boundary. I remember being sensitive. I could not have people, even friends, or doing energy work. I said, look, I can feel you already here. Can you not come so close to me? And feeling all this, because also I was many times spread all over the room instead of being inside of my skin. And especially doing healing work that I did for so many years, it's like, oh, this whole energy in the room, instead of being, contained in my skin and connect from this deep space within myself. I think boundaries are a very important aspect of this healing psychological part of a realization process.
Yeah, very much. We can even feel that we're inhabiting our skin, that we really know exactly where we end and where the world outside of us begins. So we get our true distance from everything at the same time as we get our deeper connection with everything. So yes, and that safety is so important for anyone recovering from trauma, because as children, we tend to flee ourselves when we're being threatened. We tend to leave, and that feels in the moment like it's going to be safer than being there and being yelled at or beaten or abused in some way. But of course, it leaves us hollow. It leaves us without our resources, our source of power, and our source of love, and our voice, and our source of our understanding. So it leaves us bereft of any tools we might have to actually deal with the threat. And so when we do come back into the body, we actually notice that we feel safer in contact with ourselves, safer being here, right? And if there is some threat approaching us, we can feel that a long way off if we're actually rooted in our own body. And we have the vitality, the inner life to come back towards that threat, which of course children don't have, but as adults we can have, but we need to cultivate it. We need to refine it. Well, most of us don't grow up feeling that.
Yeah, I think I felt there is also a discernment as the adult observing or being in a situation where there is a threat, that you have the discernment to decide what to do in that particular moment, and if it's to live, and many times in similar situations before, especially with me, with certain traumas that I had, that even I was an adult, I could not do anything about, because I entered into that child who was traumatized, and I could not get out of that situation. And now, working with this and healing these parts of myself, I feel the adult there, and it touches something that has been a suffering before, but that is now a new presence, a discernment, and a knowing of, this is not good for me. Okay, let's get out of here. Or if someone is speaking in a way that is not nice, and you can also express something back that I couldn't. I didn't express, I did not know how to speak. And if I spoke after a lot of emotions, I would scream and lose it. And so it's like bringing this more centered and balanced, and the ability to be able to respond more than to react, and knowing what to do, what is better for me in a particular situation. I think this is, for everyone, quite transformational, as we have, difficult relationships and situations. I would like to talk, Judith, also about this, familial patterns. And in Brazil, a lot of people are becoming aware how in their psychological psychological construct of what they think about themselves instead of being themselves. But they have been realizing how family has been family is a part that contributes to those I call adaptations or compensations. But what I also notice is that they are looking at the family in a way that they have to change the family instead of changing themselves. They realize that is something affected them because of the family relationship and the familial patterns from even previous generations, but they still do not bring the embodiment to heal that. So it's a very much a perception of everything. And the perception, it's good to have the perception. I think it's great. All right, I have the perception, but to really go and to clear the areas in the body that is still holding and defending. If you can talk about the constrictions and this part.
Yeah, one of the things that happens as we inhabit our body is we begin to live in the present as adults, as our present self. And what obstructs that, what gets in the way of that, are these constrictions through the fascia, which is a level of tissue that's everywhere in the body. We tend to actually limit ourselves in relation to our early important people in our lives, our mothers, our fathers, our siblings, people who were formative for us as young children. We tend to constrict parts of ourselves that were entangled in traumatic situations with them. So parts of ourselves that that they didn't like, that they disapproved of, that they injured, that they threatened, parts of ourselves that would evoke punishment from them or disapproval from them, such as our anger. If we spoke back, we learn to hold back those parts of ourselves so as to get as much possible love as we possibly could in those situations. So those constrictions through the fascia that we make as children especially, but actually we can make them in traumatic situations at any time in our lives. But if they're repeated over time, the tissues of the fascia tend to glue together. We get actually stuck in that constricted place. And because we're not inhabiting the area, we're not conscious of it, those are unconscious limitations in our ability to think, our ability to speak, to love, to feel empowered, our ability even to have sexual pleasure. All of that becomes limited in those constrictions. So some of the constrictions are just habitual. We go into them and come out of them. And for that, just to being in the body and observing how that occurs can help us to not do that anymore, to resolve that pattern. But if the tissues are actually glued together, we've been doing that protective stance, that protective constriction over time, then we have to approach those constrictions in a very direct way. And we have a method in the realization process for doing that. It's called the release technique. And I'm not going to go into it exactly right now, but it really needs to be done, with someone who's listening to you, because it can uncover memories, it can uncover emotional pain from the childhood. But we do have a way of focusing within those tensions in such a way that they do release, and then resolving it in conversation with a good listener, with an empathic listener, just the way any psychotherapeutic situation works. But coming out of this work of really letting go of these constrictions. And when we release the constrictions, we don't just release into thin air, we release into our embodiment. So we get really more sense of our own existence as we release those constrictions. And we come more and more into the present moment with our adult capacities to relate to any kind of situation.
Yeah. And I think the connection with the body and with fundamental consciousness gives, I call this inner safety. I'm always talking about the inner safety, because I think this gives this inner safety to release that, because most of the time this pattern has a lot of defense or protection against something. And it's not, okay, I have been defending for 30 years, 40, 50 years. Now I'm going to just say, okay, released. I understood everything, and it doesn't. It many times has this part of the mind of the child who needs to feel safe to be really, even to expose himself or herself. I feel several other modalities, let's call it this way, work with, okay, feel your body and then relax, and then feel the emotion and relax. But I think it's not deep enough, and I think it's not, I would say, subtle enough. I call this the laser surgery of emotional conflicts. To go really there in the same pattern of that was constricted, because there is a mind there doing something in the body. And I would say the body will not do this alone, you know,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is many, it's even people sometimes have met realization process, and I have, taught classes, and sometimes they don't perceive that because it's still very subtle for them to even know that there is a depth in the subtlety to go deep there, to release the mind that is holding those tissues. Yeah.
So we have some of the main practices in the realization process are about becoming more subtle. And we do that by contacting a subtle channel that we can feel, that we can contact, that runs vertically through our torso, neck, and head. And this channel has also been mentioned in the Hindu system, where it's called Sushumna, and the chakras are along it, if you've heard of those.
Yeah.
And in the Buddhist system as well, where it's called the central channel.
Central channel.
So very important part of spiritual practice, very important part of psychological healing. When we contact it, which we do in the realization process through several different practices, we do get that subtlety of focus to be able to focus right inside the constrictions and release them along the exact pathway that we used to limit ourselves in that way.
Yeah. And I think this is really important and great. I want even to take this moment to ask about this bridge between this connection between the spirituality and the psychological healing. These two things are very big in Brazil, especially spirituality, but the spirituality also there has many times a different view. And even the word non-dual is not very common. People have many times no idea what non-dual means. But also the sense that influenced a lot from the religions, the sense that we have to probably reincarnate 400 lifetimes to connect with fundamental consciousness. And it's something that is right here. We do. I think I would like you to talk about, the bridge between this.
Yes, I mean, in the Asian techniques as well, in Buddhism and Hinduism as well, this is considered quite an advanced state to get to this subtle consciousness. They do talk about it, but they talk about it as some far off state. And perhaps that was true when that literature was first being written thousands of years ago. I don't think it's true now. I find that most people who come to this work can uncover this subtle dimension of consciousness in themselves, and even pervading the world around them. So I think at this point we can assume that this is within our touch, within our grasp, to get to. Now, of course, the connection between psychology, our personal healing, and spiritual maturity, spiritual realization, that depends to some extent how you define spiritual realization. In the realization process, spirituality means getting to this most subtle attunement to ourselves and the world around us. And it means this experience of wholeness and oneness, right? Spiritual oneness. And that too has often been thought about as a kind of a peak experience. So it's all one. And yet we can get to a place just through a little bit of methodical practice where that's just an ongoing normal state to experience that oneness between self and other without losing self, right? Without losing that inward contact with ourselves. So for that reason, at this point in the work where we're looking at these constrictions and releasing them and inhabiting ourselves more deeply and more subtly, at that point, psychological healing and spiritual awakening becomes one and the same process.
Yeah.
Right? The more we get to release our psychological patterns, the more fully we get to inhabit our body, the more fully we open to fundamental consciousness.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I feel. And what I love about this process and mentioning about the spirituality, is the depths of it is always matches what I always thought, which is to be here, grounded here, where I am in this planet, in this moment right now. I'm on Earth right now, I'm a human being, and I'm here. And I used to say, more you human being you become, as strange as this sentence is, more human you become, more divine you are. I used to say that as a felt sense, but I didn't have, the pathway organized and this, as you said, that methodical exercises that you can practice, which is great to deepen this contact and to really feel that in here, it's where you connect with everything, with the fundamental consciousness. It's in very, so I really like also the exercises that ask to open your eyes and bring this to your daily life. Because you can be sitting and meditating or doing some rituals or a spiritual practice that some people do every day. But then when you go back to your normal life, everything is, it doesn't change it can change a little bit, but just doesn't change the depths of your relationships, of yourself and your daily life. And this brings a change, a shift of way of being. I always remember my daughter saying, you have more space now. You have more space now. I'm like, oh, I'm glad we're not fighting so much.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And
yeah.
It makes a difference to bring to the daily life the result of this practice. Yeah.
Yes, it's a real transformative process, not a peak experience, but an actual transformation. And so that's why we do many of the practices, not only eyes closed, but then eyes open. We do them walking, right? We do them interacting with other human beings so that we really can, even from the start of our practice, begin to bring it into our daily lives.
Yes. And today I was checking the social media in the morning and I saw a post, and the post was saying, it caught my attention because this post was saying something like this: it's important to perceive love. And everybody, a lot of likes there. And then the sentence was a little bit longer, but it caught my attention. I'm like, perceive love. Why the person is not saying feeling love? I think it talks about the fragmentation that we were talking in the beginning about. Most people don't even realize how mental they are and how disconnected they are from the neck down. And they can perceive love as something beautiful, as also an idea, but not really knowing what it is to feel love. I remember once when I was having a group of spiritual studies a long time ago, and this man was very upset. In the end, he said, you talk about love, love, what is that? I don't know what is that. And then he left the room like so upset. And I'm like, oh, because for him it's something that he was not able to organically feel. It was just an idea that he wanted to feel. I could see that was his frustration of not being able to feel. And this was many years before I knew realization process. Otherwise, I would tell him, let's practice this. And I have students who have done psychotherapies, like analysis, for 15 years. And this man was telling me, I have been doing analysis, with a therapist, different therapists for 15 years. And the only way I feel is when we are doing this work with you, with realization process. And I was like, wow. So it's the only thing that he learned how to begin to feel his own emotions and love. And can you talk a little bit about this? I know we already mentioned, but I think it's important to emphasize this, the ability to open not even only a chance, not only, to the fields of the qualities, also the awareness, the emotion, the ground that holds you, so that you can also open and feel fully all the emotions that pass through you. Doesn't mean you're gonna go and act on them, but allowing it to feel more fully.
Yeah, we definitely need to be in the body in order to feel life, in order to feel love, in order to feel anything. Many people are afraid if they feel love, what they're really going to feel is the depth of their sadness, or fear or anger, that they might even hurt someone. And one of the benefits of doing therapeutic work through inhabiting the body is that we get a kind of container for being able to tolerate those strong emotions. So even if you do feel momentarily deep grief or terror or fear or anger, it's going to move through that. It's going to move through that space without shattering you. Mm-hmm. Once you know yourself as fundamental consciousness, that level of ourselves has never been broken, can't be broken. So when we get to it, we realize that no matter what we've been through, we've never been injured, not irreparably. We've never been basically injured. We can get to that primary aspect of ourselves. And that gives us the container, the actual tolerance for being able to feel anything. And then it becomes not quite so scary to open to being in the body and whatever we might feel there. I do think, like in this story that you told about this man getting angry about it and frustrated, is we do sense something very important is missing when we're not inhabiting ourselves, right? When we're not in contact with ourselves. We know that there's a limitation, even if we don't know quite what it is. So that's why when we do finally inhabit our body, there's such a sense of relief to it.
Yeah, I think I have worked with psychotherapists and psychiatrists and yoga teachers, and it's so interesting that I would think, oh, they already know all of this, and in fact, the psychiatrist I was working and in fact, when he found like the center of the head and the central channel, and he felt really safe. He felt, I think, exactly that way of saying, this place that was never hurt. And he said, wow, this is a new place for me. I don't think I have ever been in this place within myself. And he discovered, I said, well, welcome to this world. There's a new, there's a doorway, I think, for this, beautiful part of ourselves that we are missing. And I think you're totally right. There is a sense of something is not here, and something that I want, and something that I want to feel and reach. So I think this is really transformational, and I'm very excited to bring this to Brazil and bring this to more people who speak, Portuguese or Spanish.
I'm so glad you're doing it, Roberta. Yeah.
And I really, appreciate and honor your work and yourself, because this has been very transformational for me, has been very transformational also for other teachers that I have trained in realization process. And I just want to even mention last week, my student, who is now a teacher, was guiding the meditation, just what we call exercise 1, the full meditation in the body of someone. And they were in different continents, and the person who received the guidance of this exercise said, how can you be 9,000 kilometers away from me? And I feel so present, and I feel your presence here. And I feel much more than when I had teachers sitting next to me. And she was like puzzled by the sense of safety that she felt in connecting with her own body. And that's for me the motivation to translate everything, and also to bring this for people who are looking for, and that they can now practice this, know that that is a tool that can help them with this. There's a method, and they can practice. And also I feel it's not only once, but it is once you also stabilize in fundamental consciousness, that there is always levels of depths that we can deepen and deepen. I'm still working. I always say I'm still working on my constrictions. So, and yet, even though there is fragmented parts of ourself does not block you from knowing this part of yourself that is always there. And that is something that many people also do not know, the possibility of connecting with it now, and using that inner safety that comes with it to, in fact, work even more deeply. Yes. Thank you,
Roberta.
Thank you so much, Judith. I really appreciate, and thank you for being here with us, and thank you for offering the world this process. Thank you.
You're very welcome.